Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
A U.S. aircraft carrier group sailed into the South China Sea and a so-called freedom of navigation exercise, the first routine operation in the region under new President Joe Biden.
Indian and Chinese troops have fought a new brawl on their contested Himalayan border, leaving injuries on both sides.
And border restrictions are being tightened around the world Monday in the face of an unrelenting coronavirus threat.
And U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is set to send the Senate a single article of impeachment accusing Donald Trump of inciting the Capitol riot, formally triggering the first-ever impeachment trial of a former president.
First, a U.S. aircraft carrier group sailed in the South China Sea on a so-called freedom of navigation exercise, the first routine operation in the region under new President Joe Biden. China's foreign ministry spokesman called the routine U.S. exercises a show of force and not conducive to the peace and stability of the region. Take a look.
美国频繁地派舰机进入南海活动，炫耀武力，不利于 地区局势的和平与稳定。
Led by the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the carrier strike group entered the area on Saturday. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said the same day Taiwan reported multiple Chinese jets and bombers had flown into its air defense zone. Beijing lays claims to nearly all of the South China Sea, despite Taiwan, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam also saying parts belong to them. The South China Sea is a strategic waterway and also believed to have valuable oil and gas deposits. Beijing has moved aggressively to turn reefs into artificial islands capable of hosting military planes, angering nations which also stake claims in the area.
In other news, Indian and Chinese troops have fought a new brawl on their contested Himalayan border, leaving injuries on both sides, military officials said. The fighting on January 20 came 6 months after a pitched battle which left at least 20 Indian troops dead, as well as an unknown number of Chinese casualties. The world's two most populous nations have since become embroiled in a diplomatic showdown over their geographical and political differences. The Indian military played down the latest skirmish as a minor face-off at Naku La Paz, which connects Sikkim state with Tibet on the Chinese side. A short statement said the tensions were resolved by local commanders as per established protocols. Government sources said 4 Indian troops were injured when a Chinese patrol was forced back. They added that China's People's Liberation Army suffered an unknown number of casualties. The incident, however, highlighted the increasingly fraught state of India-China relations. However, details were released on the eve of India's Republic Day, when the country shows off its latest military hardware at a parade in the capital.
Multiple Chinese jets and bombers flew into Taiwan's air defense zone on Sunday, according to a Taipei report. While on Monday, Indian and Chinese troops fought a new brawl on their contested Himalayan border that left injuries on both sides. Regaining control over Taiwan is probably the most important strategic priority for Beijing, according to East Asia Security and Defense Specialist Dr. Michael Ruska, as tensions rise at 2 of China's geopolitical flashpoints. Take a look.
For China, Taiwan and regaining regaining control over Taiwan is probably most important strategic priority. So the PLA, the Chinese military, whatever they train for is primarily focused on having the capability and or the options to really impose cost on Taiwan and to deter Taiwan from declaring independence. Of course, the timing of that particular exercise could be interpreted as a challenge to the Joe Biden's administration and the whole new team that is set out there, and a way to signal that China is not going to back down over its interest, whether it's the Taiwan Strait, whether it's the South China Sea. Well, what is very interesting about the Chinese Air Force exercises in the Taiwan's air identification zone is really its magnitude and scale. China would usually send 1 to 3 planes at one particular time. This time around, they say they sent over a dozen planes for 2 days. So the magnitude and impact and scale of these exercises really signals Chinese priority, focusing on Taiwan and focusing on the U.S. presence in the South China Sea, or the sporadic clashes between China and India over the disputed land territory in the Himalayas, represents another flashpoint between great powers. And as India is rethinking its strategic options going forward, how it's going to align itself, whether with the United States and the Quad, and China will be increasingly testing India's position. Whatever happens in India, whatever happens in other flashpoints in East Asia, they are increasingly connected.
50,000 lives. We're asking the American people to mask up for the first 100 days. Always level with you, I promise you. And the brutal truth is that things are going to get worse the next several months before they get better. We didn't get into this mess overnight. It's going to take time for us to turn things around. But we also have to act now, with urgency and unity as the United States of America.
Biden will also on Monday extend the ban to travelers who have recently been to South Africa amid warnings that new, more transmissible coronavirus variants are already establishing themselves in the United States, according to the official, confirming U.S. media reports. In his last days in office, Donald Trump announced that a COVID-19 ban on travelers arriving from much of Europe and Brazil would be lifted, but the Biden administration immediately said it would reverse the order due to come into effect on January 26. Since it emerged in late 2019, COVID-19 has killed more than 2.1 million people, with almost 99 million cases registered, according to an AFP tally from official figures.
Meanwhile, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced that he was infected with the coronavirus, but he said his symptoms were mild. The left-wing populist is rarely seen wearing a mask in public, including at his daily news conferences, and has kept up most of his activities during the pandemic. López Obrador has continued his travels to different parts of the country, and on Friday visited the northern state of San Luis Potosí. He was criticized for being slow to impose a lockdown at the start of the pandemic and for continuing to hold rallies and greet supporters with handshakes and even hugs. López Obrador said he would work from the presidential palace this week and delegate Interior Minister Olga Sanchez to represent him at his daily news conference. Mexico City has been in a state of maximum alert since mid-December, with more than 90% of hospital beds full due to soaring infections. Non-essential activities have been suspended in the capital.
Meanwhile, a reminder of the vigilance required to keep infections down came from New Zealand, where officials confirmed the first case of COVID-19 in the community for more than 2 months in a 56-year-old woman who recently returned from Europe. It has been identified as the more contagious South African variant. The latest case in New Zealand's first in the community since mid-November has been classified as a strain said to be more transmissible. Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt said it was a case of significant concern, and the increased possibility of transmission had prompted his government to suspend its travel bubble with New Zealand for a minimum of 72 hours. Hunt urged New Zealanders with a flight to Australia scheduled within the next 3 days to reconsider their need to travel, as they will have to go into hotel quarantine like other international arrivals for up to 14 days on arrival.
Meanwhile, protests against a coronavirus curfew in the Netherlands degenerated into clashes with police and looting in cities across the country Sunday, a day after a COVID-19 testing center was set on fire in the northern village of Urk. Police used water cannon and dogs in Amsterdam. Public television NOS reported after hundreds gathered to protest the 9 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. curfew set to last until February 10. At least 30 people were arrested in Eindhoven, where Mayor John Juritsma told reporters that if the country continued down this path, then he thinks they are heading for civil war. Violators of the 9 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. curfew, which Prime Minister Mark Rutte says is needed to bring case numbers down, face a €95 or $115 fine. Exemptions are possible in particular for people returning from funerals or those having to work, but on condition that they present a certificate. Rutte also announced on Wednesday a ban on flights from Britain, South Africa, and South America, and a cut in the number of guests allowed in people's homes to 1 from the previous limit of 2. New variants of the virus have led to deep concern in Europe, particularly a more infectious strain that first emerged in Britain.
Sweden made headlines around the world by not imposing the type of lockdown used elsewhere in Europe to curb the spread of COVID-19, relying instead on mostly non-coercive measures to tackle the virus. But faced with a stronger second wave over recent months, the Nordic nation has tightened measures in a bid to bring infections down. Watch this.
This specialist ECMO ward in Stockholm's Karolinska Hospital treats some of the most critical COVID cases. Currently, 2 patients are being treated here. After a busy spring, the team expanded the ward, building the specialist isolation room. Dr. Lars Falk's team is better prepared than last spring and is now seeing a steady intake of critical COVID patients from regular ICUs after a summer lull.
It was that we took the worst scenario from the Folkhälsomyndigheten and we doubled up one. And what we were actually seeing in terms of ICU, critical care patients, not ECMO patients, but critical care patients, it's much higher than what we estimated from the numbers.
With deaths climbing past the 10,000 mark in mid-January, a heavier than expected second wave has seen the government tighten its antivirus measures. A common sight in other countries, these commuters in Stockholm have only been recommended to wear masks on public transport since early January, and only during rush hour. Stores, shopping centres, sports halls and pools must also limit the number of visitors to 1 per 10 metres squared, and gatherings of more than 8 in public places are banned. While its neighbours adopted strict measures like lockdowns, Sweden had largely relied on non-coercive measures and urged its citizens to take responsibility for themselves.
I have my own responsibility. Also, I cannot just act like a 2-year-old and say it was mommy's fault, or in my case, it was the government's fault. I have to look after myself as well. It's my responsibility as well.
Unlike other countries, Sweden does not have legislation allowing the government to shut down society in peacetime. On the 8th of January, Parliament passed a pandemic law, giving the government new powers to curb the virus's spread and allowing it to introduce new restrictions, something ministers say wasn't needed before.
These are far-reaching restrictions, but they're needed, not least, to make it easier for all staff in healthcare who are working very hard, day and night.
Restaurants and bars have remained open, but with recommendations on social distancing. Since Christmas Eve, they have been subject to a ban on alcohol sales after 8 p.m. These chefs and waiters at a central Stockholm restaurant are making a noise about the changes. They're not protesting the restrictions themselves, but asking for support as their revenues are hit.
I think they need to increase the support system because we're now being prohibited to actually try to take care of ourselves.
Avoiding lockdowns and keeping society open, Sweden's softer approach to the virus has seen it hailed by some and held up elsewhere as a cautionary tale. Now the government hopes tightened measures will help it to check its winter second wave that has strained healthcare around the country.
In a related news, Sweden now said it would bar entry from Norway for 3 weeks after a cluster of a faster-spreading coronavirus strain appeared in its neighbor's capital, Oslo. People who live and work in Sweden will be exempt from the entry ban, set to come into force from midnight today. Meanwhile, Stockholm said that it would extend a similar ban on arrivals from Britain, where the faster-spreading variant was first detected, and neighboring Denmark over the same period until February 14. By Wednesday, Sweden had already detected 50 cases of the British variant, while Norway's count was up to 70 by Sunday. Norway has further tightened its own entry rules, demanding arrivals present a negative PCR test from within the past 24 hours and requiring additional tests for those traveling from areas at risk of the new variants.
In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the country was closing the skies hermetically, except for rare exceptions to both arrivals and departures for a week. The measure will begin at midnight from Monday into Tuesday and remain in effect until Sunday, a statement from the office of the Prime Minister said. Exceptions will be made for cargo and firefighting flights, as well as trips for medical treatments, funerals, and legal procedures. A panel of Health and Interior Ministry officials will be able to issue exemptions on a request for humanitarian or personal needs, according to the statement. The decision came with the country in its third national coronavirus lockdown, initiated last December and extended on Tuesday until the end of the month due to a surge in COVID-19 deaths. Later Sunday, the Health Ministry announced it had identified cases of a coronavirus variant originating in Los Angeles. Variants from South Africa and Britain have also been found in Israel. Since the rollout of vaccinations last month, more than 2.5 million of Israel's 9 million-strong population have been vaccinated, according to the Health Ministry. On Saturday, Israel began vaccinating teens aged 16 to 18 who need to sit final high school exams.
Meanwhile, here in the Philippines, presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque said the mandatory completion of the 14-day facility-based quarantine for passengers arriving in our country will be replaced by RT-PCR tests upon arrival and another test on their 5th day of quarantine. He also said that in case the result of their second RT-PCR test is negative, they will still be taken to their respective LGUs and they will have to complete a 2-week quarantine at home. Take a look.
Bawal pa rin ang lahat ng mga banyaga na manggagaling sa 35 bansang may travel restrictions hanggang katapusan po ng buwan. Sa mga dumating dahil sa medical at emergency cases, pati na medical escorts kung mayroon, ay sasailalim na ngayon sa applicable testing and quarantine protocols as described by the Department of Health. Alam niyo po, ang bagong protocols ay pagdating, PCR. Pag negative, quarantine. Sa pang-5 araw, PCR. Pag negatibo, i-endorso po sila sa kanilang mga LGU kung saan dapat sila ay mag-quarantine pa rin para makumpleto ang 14-day quarantine. Yan po ang buwang sa mga darating na mga Pilipino sa mga lugar na merong new variant. Para sa mga detalye, mangyaring bisitahin ang website or Facebook ng Bureau of Immigration. Pagdating naman po sa testing at quarantine protocols para sa mga kung saan mayroong travel restrictions dahil sa new COVID-19 variants, ang mga pasaherong ito ay itetest pagdating at i-quarantine hanggang makuha ang resulta ng subsequent test na i-administer sa ikalimang araw. Ngayon po, yung mga itetest sa airport, nakipag-ugnayan na po ang ating gobyerno na ang first test po pwedeng Philippine Red Cross, ang subsequent test yung PAL Testing Center po. Mandatory pa rin po ang 14-day quarantine ha. Kung dati ay absolute base facility, kapag negatibo sa pangalawang swab test, pwede ang lokal na pamalahan na destinasyon ng pasahero ang magmamonitor ng remainder ng 14-day quarantine. Mga LGUs, naku, kinakailangan po natin ng tulong dahil kung hindi makukumpleto ang 14-day quarantine, baka kumalat po itong bagong COVID-19 variant.
COVID-19 cases in the country breached the 514,000 mark on Monday, January 25, after the Department of Health reported 1,581 additional cases. The areas with the most COVID-19 cases reported today were Quezon City with 89, Cebu with 88, Cavite with 80, Davao with 78, and Cebu with 50. 13 additional recoveries pushed the COVID-19 recoveries in the Philippines to 475,422. 50 additional deaths pushed the COVID-19 death toll to 10,292, and the government has confirmed the United Kingdom COVID-19 virus variant has entered the country after a Quezon City resident tested positive for the same upon arrival from Dubai, United Arab Emirates. On Friday, the QC government said he already tested negative for COVID-19 but was under strict monitoring. On the same day, health authorities also confirmed the UK variant had been detected in 16 other COVID-19 cases in the country. Today, the DOH said so far 38 close contacts of 13 of those new cases with the variant had tested positive for COVID-19.
On Sunday, France started demanding a negative PCR test for arrivals by sea and air from European Union neighbors. The requirement had already applied to non-EU arrivals since mid-January. EU travelers entering France by land, including cross-border workers, will not need a negative test. Some 62,000 people currently arrive in French airports and seaports from other EU countries every week, according to Transport Minister Jean-Baptiste Djebari. Paris's main international airport, Charles de Gaulle, set up testing centers in a terminal dedicated to intra-EU flights to allow arriving passengers who failed to obtain a test in their country of origin to get one before passing immigration.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong lifted its first neighborhood coronavirus lockdown on Monday morning after testing some 7,000 people and finding just a handful of cases as debates swirled over the efficacy of the move. Over the weekend, police moved in to seal off a poor and densely populated neighborhood of about 150 apartment blocks, where coronavirus clusters had sprung up in recent weeks. Officials went door to door conducting mandatory tests and found that 0.17% of those tested had the virus. Some community and business leaders were critical of how the lockdown was carried out, but officials defended the move as proportionate and said they would not rule out similar neighborhood lockdowns. Hong Kong was one of the first places to be struck by the coronavirus after it spilled out of central China. It has recorded just over 10,000 infections with some 170 deaths by imposing effective but economically punishing social distancing measures for much of the last year.
In other news, Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced Monday that Australia's medical regulator has formally approved the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, with the first doses expected to be administered in late February. Watch this.
It's a year today since the first case of COVID-19 in Australia, and what an extraordinary year it has been over these past 12 months. But a year on from that fateful day, this is a global challenge like none we've seen in a very, very long time. And there will be challenges along the way, and we are addressing them. We're more looking at late February than mid-February now, because of the challenges that we've seen in the production and delivery for both AZ and Pfizer around the world. You'll be very aware of the situation and the pressures that we're seeing globally.
Australia has secured 10 million doses from Pfizer, enough to vaccinate 5 million people, with healthcare workers and the elderly expected to receive the first jabs. Largely virus-free Australia has fared comparatively well in its COVID-19 response, with 909 deaths from about 28,700 cases in a population of 25 million. The country has also secured more than 50 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, with the majority set to be manufactured locally, but the TGA is yet to grant the approval.
In India, meanwhile, around one-third of people are not turning up for vaccine appointments, with fear of side effects high after reports of a few cases of severe reactions spread widely through the media and messaging services. Let's listen in.
But in my batch, there are 80 students and only 2 people are agree for the vaccination, me and my friend who are here. So this is just because of the fear. Fear factor. There is no problem in get vaccinated, but this is just the fear.
पहले से लोगों ने बोला कि वैक्सीन के लिए इतना हंगामा था, वैक्सीन नहीं आई है। अब वैक्सीन आ गई है तो अब लोग डर रहे हैं लगवाने से, अब लगवाना नहीं चाहते हैं।
European health authorities have said there's no evidence the vaccines were to blame in the deaths of small numbers of nursing home residents who died after receiving them. India is using 2 shots for its drive. One is Covishield, a locally produced version of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been approved and safely used in a number of other countries after completing phase 3 human trials. The other is Covaxin. It was developed locally by Bharat Biotech and has not yet completed phase 3 trials, though the government has insisted it is, quote, 110% safe. Side effects are a common fear, with a few cases of severe reactions and even deaths reported widely in the media and circulating widely on Facebook and WhatsApp. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Access Control System, Factory Automation and Modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. CJ, I think we interrupt this regular programming to give way to President Duterte's press conference going on right now in Malacanang, if I'm not mistaken.
Minister nila, that it can, that kind of affliction can, walang limit sa edad kung ilan. So it does not have any cut off there. So just to be sure, and in our desire to protect our people, napilitan akong i-reimpose yung 10 to 14. Not at this time. It's a sacrifice for the parents and for the children. It would limit their movements and their, that's about the time when they are playful and they need space to, move. Yan ang problema. Hindi natin sigurado. Once it is confirmed na talaga mga bata tinatamaan, pati as young as 10 years old or even younger, well, that order will subsist until such time that everybody will be safe by the bakuna. So, habulan ito. And I'd like to report to you again that we are doing our very best. Secretary Galvez, General Galvez is there. Ang ano ko lang ganito. Merong iba dyan, because wala silang nakuha kay Galvez, kaya wala man talaga, walang pera, laway pa lang ito lahat, conversation, istorya. Meron na nagsabi may corruption o na they were able to obstruct or prevent corruption because of their timely alam mo, bulador ka. Mag-usap nga tayo, tayo lang. Kung sino nagsabi niyan, please rise and be brave enough to say that you're the one. I'd like to talk to you. Tayo lang dalawa. Maski saan mo gusto, sa bahay mo, para medyo magandang usapan o hindi sa labas kasi bawal. You can do it in the house at office at Pasig. Pinapalabas napigilan namin yung corruption timely dahil sa wala pa sinasabi na ang bayad dyan maging anuman pera na cold cash or papel lang yan. Hindi yan magpadala ng pera doon, ng papel yan sa bangko yan. That it will be credited sa account kung sinong manufacturer. Hindi walang hawak ng pera dyan. Actually. Kaya dyan ako kasi walang nakuha. They're still trying to prick the brains of Galvez, looking for something which is not there at all. Dito tayo just to show that we are in the process of still cleansing government. Ang na-dismissed sa service, Rodrigo, hindi Duterte ha, Rodrigo Valencia, administrative aid for DSWD Central Office. Si Godofredo Estefa Jr., Administrative Unit Chief, DSWD. DSWD to that. Inefficiency and incompetence in the performance of duties. 1 year suspension. Ian and Hirose S. Montibano, Accountant, DSWD, Field Office, NCR. Inefficiency and incompetence in the performance of official duties. Simple discourtesy in the course of official duties. Alam mo ba bakit? Putak, kayong nasa gobyerno, lahat, police, pati presidente, kayo lahat, tayo lahat dito. Maraming Pilipino na bright na walang trabaho. Diyan sa civil service, maraming nakalista diyan first grade eligible na hanggang ngayon hindi pa nakakita ng trabaho. I suggest na kayong mga first grade eligible, huwag na kailangan kayong maging ng padrino. Mag-apply kayo sa civil service, and civil service will reject the recommendations. Ano yung I'll appoint you? Hindi na ang maghanap ng, walang politika. Pagka magdala ka sa akin ng application tapos may sulat na ganito, I endorse na mula Ricky Bunao, Officer 5 ng Center Head of Haven for Elderly, DSWD. Serious dishonesty, grave misconduct, conduct prejudicial to the best interest of the service. 6 months. I will ask for the papers pa-forward sa opisina ko sa Pasig River. Yan. I will terminate them. Evelyn Santoyo, Municipal Link DSWD, disgraceful and immoral conduct. Ano kayang ginawa nito niya? Disgraceful and immoral conduct. Suspended for 6 months. Acela Bella Che, Provincial Link DSWD Field Office. Serious dishonesty. Well, of course, you have to go. I am asking the DSWD, General Bautista, to send me the papers. I will try to review. And baka i-overrule ko kayo at I will decide to dismiss them. Ben Calzado, Warehouse Manager, DSWD, Field Office, inefficiency, incompetence in the performance of official duties, suspended for 1 year. Incompetence. Ewan ko kung madala pa ba ito. Carmelita Roxanne Cruz, Provincial Development Officer, DSWD, Field Office, 10. Serious dishonesty, grave misconduct, contracting loans of money or other property from persons with whom the office of the employee has business relation. This is a serious offense. Tama yan. Dismissed from the service. No motion for reconsideration yan. Yan na muna. DSWD. Ngayon, meron tayo dito. Kaya I ask the permission of the body to allow me a little time. Unahin ito. Itong corruption, at I am speaking in behalf of sa amin lahat dito, yung gamitan ng pangalan. Alam mo, kami politiko, lalo na nung eleksyon, kung sinong lumapit sa amin magpa-photo, o di, politiko, buto yan eh. Ngayon, peace time na, tapos na ang eleksyon, itong lokohan na pakita nila, katabi ko sila, o sa kasal na magkakumari, kumpare kami, tapos may nilalakad, tapos sabihin na lalakarin namin yung papel mo, bigyan mo kami ng down payment ng ano. Mga kababayan ko, mahirap lang kami. Pero hindi, I'm sure kami lahat, hindi namin daanin sa
That was Philippine President Duterte saying those who are 10 to 15 years old will have to remain at home. And he also assured the public that there will be no corruption in the acquisition of COVID vaccines. And also he named government officials who will be who are involved in corruption and will be suspended or taken out of their jobs here at the government. There you have it. The president still ongoing at the Malacanang is his press conference. We'll give you updates on that tomorrow. Meanwhile, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is set to send the Senate a single article of impeachment Monday, accusing Donald Trump of inciting the Capitol riot, formally triggering the first-ever impeachment trial of a former president. Pelosi, the top Democrat in Congress, vowed last week that the trial, already scheduled to open in the second week of February, should proceed. Watch this.
We can put any finer point on the timing for the articles of impeachment.
No.
Okay.
And it'll be soon, as I said, you'll be the first to know.
Thank you.
The fact is, the President of the United States committed an act of incitement of insurrection. I don't think it's very unifying to say, oh, let's just forget it and move on.
Senior figures in Trump's party have pushed back with both political and constitutional arguments, raising doubts that Democrats who control 50 seats in the 100-seat chamber can secure the 17 Republican votes to reach the two-thirds majority needed to convict. I think the trial is stupid. I think it's counterproductive. We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top. Marco Rubio, the top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, told Fox News on Sunday. He acknowledged that Trump, who had urged thousands of his supporters to flock to Washington and protest the congressional certification of Joe Biden's victory, bears some responsibility for what happened. But to stir it up again could only hurt the country, said Rubio, a presidential candidate beaten by Trump in the 2016 primary. Other Republicans argued that the Senate has no authority to put a private citizen, as Trump now is, on trial. Senator Mike Rounds told NBC's Meet the Press that the Constitution does not allow for the impeachment of a former president.
In other news, 9 more Chinese miners trapped underground for over 2 weeks have been confirmed dead, according to local government officials, leaving 1 unaccounted for after a blast at the site. A group of 22 were trapped hundreds of meters underground by an explosion at the Yushan mine in eastern Shandong province on January 10, with some relying on food and medicine delivered through long shafts drilled by rescue teams. 11 survivors were finally brought to the surface on Sunday in a major breakthrough for a rescue operation that has captivated the nation. Rescue teams will not stop searching until the last remaining miner is found. The mayor of Yantai City, Chen Fei, said the initial explosion occurred in the mine's ventilator shaft, causing a blockage that damaged the cable car. Chen said that all 9 miners had been killed by the impact of a secondary explosion in the mine on January 10 as they were trying to escape, judging from their positions.
The United States is leading rivals in development and use of artificial intelligence, while China is rising quickly and the European Union is lagging, a research report showed Monday. The study by the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation assessed AI using 30 separate metrics, including human talent, research activity, commercial development, and investment in hardware and software. The United States leads with an overall score of 44.6 points on a 100-point scale, followed by China with 32 and the European Union with 23.3, the report based on 2020 data found. The researchers found the U.S. leading in key areas such as investment in startups and research and development funding. But China has made strides in several areas and last year had more of the world's 500 most powerful supercomputers than any other nation, 214 compared with 113 for the U.S. and 91 for the EU. But it said that average U.S. research quality is still higher than that of China and the European Union. The survey also concluded that the United States is still the world leader in designing chips for AI systems.
Meanwhile, Spacex launched its Falcon 9 rocket carrying a record number of satellites on board. Take a look. The rocket successfully launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida at 10 a.m., 24 hours after its initial takeoff had been scrubbed due to bad weather. Andy Tran, a SpaceX production supervisor, said in a video of the launch that the Falcon 9 was carrying 133 commercial and government spacecraft, as well as 10 SpaceX satellites. SpaceX is flying Falcon 9 under a ride-share program through which other firms and governments pay the Elon Musk founded company to deliver their technologies to space. In a series of tweets, SpaceX said all 143 satellites had been successfully deployed. SpaceX aims to send thousands of small satellites into space to form a global broadband system called Starlink. Scientists have expressed concerns about the number of objects clogging the space around Earth. SpaceX say their satellites are designed to burn up in the atmosphere within a few years.
Really cool tracking shot of Falcon 9. All is looking good with the stage 1 trajectory.
Families in Mozambique have taken refuge in schools to escape the heavy winds and lashing rains of Cyclone Eloise after it made landfall in the southern African country. Flooding and destruction as Cyclone Eloise makes landfall. At least 9 people died. It devastated buildings in Mozambique's second largest city, and people have taken refuge in schools to escape heavy wind and rains. Many key communication networks are down. The storm has since lost its strength and has been downgraded to a tropical storm, according to the World Meteorological Organization, or the WMO. Forecasters believe it will now move towards Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. Flooding will remain a major threat in the days to come.
In Los Angeles, murals are painted in tribute to basketball legend Kobe Bryant, who died a year ago with his daughter Gianna Bryant in a helicopter crash in California. Take a look.
This mural is for Kobe and his family. It's called Mamba Business, like family business. So I wanted to incorporate people who are close to him as well, extended family, NBA family.
I am a huge Kobe fan, a huge Lakers fan, and so when I was approached to do the Kobe mural, I was super excited and super passionate about the project.
Such a big loss.
I know, we all still miss him, and that void will never be filled. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.